Hello and welcome to Data Driven, the podcast where we explore the emerging field of data science. We bring the best minds in data, software engineering, machine learning and artificial intelligence. Now here are your hosts, Frank Lavinia and Andy Leonard.
Hello and welcome to Data Driven, the podcast where we focus on the emerging fields of data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. If you like to think of data as the new oil, then you can think of this show as Car Talk, because we focus on where the rubber meets the virtual road. And with me on this epic road trip down the information superhighway, as always, is everybody's favorite data philosopher turned chief data engineer, Andy Leonard.
Hey, Frank, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. We're recording this in that gray zone between Christmas and New Year's.
Yep.
Which actually for me has not been a quiet time. I have been heads down in Hadoop.
Awesome.
Yeah. But we'll talk about that later. I think today we have something special to say. All right. So we actually have a kind of a big announcement or a milestone, but I will treat the moment with the all due reverence and play some music.
Okay. This is show number 100.
What?
Yeah.
So I'm sure there's a lot of people there scratching their heads because I think we're probably going to label this show 20-something or something like that. So they're like, what? How could this be show 100? Is this some kind of new math thing?
Well, it's because, Frank, you've been doing so many killer data points. And, early in the summer, you were doing a lot of data science dailies. We tried a bunch of things out, and we're going to keep doing that. We're going to keep adding things, and things will fade in and fade out as we go through this, just because.
Experimentation.
Absolutely. Well, that's what data science is really all about, is it not?
That's what puts the science in data science.
This is also, I think this is the first show where I'm using my new Yeti mic.
Yes. So one of the things that came back was people would tell me they love the show, but the feedback was you got to do something about Andy's mic.
Well, here we go.
We do listen to feedback, kids.
We absolutely do. I like this mic. I still really don't know how to use it. I've been playing around with the settings. There's like 4 or 5 knobs on it. It's an engineer's dream in that sense. It
really is. I've had the Yeti for a couple of years, and it's just I love it. I have a pop filter on it too, which I think you do as well.
I don't, but I've got it placed far enough away from me where it's not really a problem.
Cool. So for those who have no idea what a pop filter is, if you've ever seen video of musicians recording an album, it's that little piece of nylon between their mouth and the microphone.
Yeah, I could do a demo, but it would hurt your ears if you're wearing earbuds. I could actually get close to the mic and say pop, and you'd probably feel it and hear it. So I won't do that to you. Take my word for it. It's painful.
Blow out the speakers, your bass speakers in your car too. But that's why it's called a pop filter, because it basically stands between your mouth, and the microphone and blocks the air.
That's it. That is it.
We're learning all kinds of new things today.
We are. And, Frank, I know you've been working some with Hadoop. I know you've got a course that's coming out. You've been playing some with Azure.gov. You've delivered some training on that recently. You just got your hands into all sorts of cool stuff.
I feel like I have learned more in the past 4 or 5 weeks than I have in the last 2-3 years.
Wow.
That's saying something. So as part of my job at Wintellect, we had a couple of training gigs set up for December on basically providing training for how to use the Azure.gov service, which is the government certified version of Azure. And it's a very cool product, a very cool idea. However, with the great government certifications comes great limitations.
Well, it's just like the regular Azure service, isn't it?
In theory.
You say that like there's some differences, Frank. What are the differences?
Basically, anything that goes on Azure.gov, the purpose of Azure.gov is that government agencies at the state, federal, and local levels can put their workloads into this cloud.
Yeah.
However, in order to comply with various regulations, everything on this cloud is certified. It's a completely separate data center. It's completely everything separate about it. But the nice thing is that it meets things like FedRAMP, and it's even HIPAA compliant. There's all sorts of good stuff that if you're working on a regulated industry or government entity, this is the type of cloud you can use.
Interesting.
And now to that end is that they can't be as experimental as they are on Azure government, as in regular Azure. So there's a lot of things that are kind of locked down or just not available yet.
So what's locked down?
Well, by the time you hear this, this probably won't be the case, but Azure Functions is available in Azure.gov, but the UI has not yet been certified.
Oh, okay.
Now, that's supposed to be cleared up in December. So I'll, depending on when I publish this, that may or may not be the case.
Gotcha.
Depending on what their definition of in December was, I know that, mid-December was not meeting the mark because we had to go through and rework the labs we have for Azure, regular Azure, and basically rework them to do the command line interface.
Interesting.
And that's something that really speaks to just because the PowerPoint slide or the website says that X is available in Azure.gov. Available is one of those words has more than a binary meaning.
So it could be that the product or service or feature is there, but in order to use it, you'd have to use a command line interface.
Right.
Okay.
And for those who don't know, Azure has this, you could use PowerShell, obviously. But we like to do things that are more cross-platform because, believe it or not, there's things called Macs that pop up every now and then.
That's crazy talk.
It's wild. So Azure CLI is something you install, and you can just issue commands to it, and it works in Bash and it works in Windows Command.
Nice.
And it's a pretty neat thing once you get used to it. The documentation is not as robust as kind of using the graphical interface in the portal.
Right.
But if you dig around, you can find out what you need to do.
Okay. That's
a lot of trial and error.
Well, I'm curious, is this just for the U.S. government, or can other nations' governments use Azure.gov?
That's a good question. I'm glad you asked. So there's this notion of, and I know the inside story of a lot of this because of where I worked at when I was at Microsoft.
Right.
So there's Azure China, and there's Azure Germany, and I think there's one other one. But they're calling them sovereign clouds.
That's an interesting term.
It is. So Azure.gov is a quote-unquote sovereign cloud. And basically what it means is that even though it's running Azure, the ownership and the management of it is completely separate from regular Azure. Now, for the U.S. federal one, there's a pretty clear mission of what that is.
Right.
Now, the politics of the PRC, People's Republic of China, being what they are, they made it sure that the ownership, that normal Azure data centers are owned and operated by Microsoft.
Right.
Right. Pretty straightforward.
Right.
No surprise there.
Sure.
As is Azure.gov. Azure.gov is owned and operated by Microsoft. Now, something very interesting happened, I think 2-3 years ago, where there was some kind of drug-related case, and the data for one of the suspects is stored in the Azure data center in Dublin, Ireland.
I remember this case. Yeah.
Right. Now, this is why you're starting to see this pop up.
Right.
And I'll explain kind of why that is. pausing because I'm trying to remember what I know, what I'm supposed to know publicly and what I'm not supposed to know publicly.
Well, if I remember, I didn't know things that you know about this, so I can summarize that the data was stored outside of the United States territory. There was no jurisdiction, and there was a request from some agency to retrieve that data, and it was a U.S. agency, to retrieve that data, and they expected Microsoft to comply with that order. However, the data center was on someone else's sovereign territory. And there was a bit of a dust-up over that, if I recall.
And the dust-up is still going on. Okay. It probably won't get resolved till it hits the Supreme Court, honestly.
That's really interesting, though. I mean, when you think about that, and I'm not judging either way. It's just there's a lot of dynamics in there, right? Because Microsoft is a U.S. company, but the data resides in another country.
Right. So this is kind of the crux of the argument. And if Brad Smith is the chief legal counsel at Microsoft. I'd love to get him on the show and him talk about it.
Yeah.
I actually have a selfie of me and him. So.
Oh, wow.
A selfie.
Okay.
So like he does know of me. Whether or not he remembers me is another thing. But the short of it is that basically data stored in Ireland, right? Another country, another sovereign territory.
Right.
Department of Justice is like, give us that data.
Right.
Microsoft's like, well, no. There are places and mechanisms in place to get that.
Right.
You can call the Irish authorities and they would issue a warrant, and Microsoft would be compelled to give it to them. The Department of Justice, and this started in the previous administration, said, no. You're an American company.
Right.
You fall under our jurisdiction. And Microsoft's response is kind of like, I don't think it works that way.
Well, you can kind of see both sides of it. And I'm not I promise, I'm not taking sides, and I'm not favoring, you know me, Frank, I'm big on privacy. So I like the fact that Microsoft said no, but I also understand, I do understand the government's position on that. I get it. So it'll be interesting to see how this works out.
Yeah, I won't be as kind. I think the Department of Justice is just overreaching. I mean, it's true. I mean, so one of the examples, one of the stated reasons that the DOJ gave was, no, we need to be able to respond quickly. Right? You can kind of scratch your chin and say, yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Now, the Bataclan attack happened, and the French authorities went through the existing channels to subpoena information and get a warrant.
Right.
They had data which was stored, I think, in the U.S. even.
Interesting.
They were able to get the data in 45 minutes.
Wow, that's pretty quick.
Yeah. Now you could contrast this with the DOJ's kind of heavy-handed approach.
Yeah.
Which it's going on 2 years.
Interesting.
At least. I'm sure someone will know the actual truth and kind of, beat us up in the comments. But
possible.
I mean,
but still,
in longer than 45 minutes.
Yeah, 45 minutes is a lot less time than 2 years.
Right, and the idea that Microsoft is putting forth as, and this is cool because I don't work for them anymore, so I don't have to toe the party line. I actually do, in this case, though, I do agree with their party line, is the idea that there's already laws in place for this.
Right.
There's already treaties in place for this
that
can handle subpoenas. I mean, that's, and their take is that, this, and you always have that slippery slope argument.
Oh, yeah.
So there's this one clip, and I want to find it. I assume it's on C-SPAN. The C-SPAN is not known for its comedy or drama.
Right.
But basically, Representative Darrell Issa was grilling basically the DOJ on this. And he's like, basically it summed down to, well, if he said, well, how would you feel if Irish authorities wanted to arrest you and they just, they issued a warrant in Ireland and then they just marched right in here and pulled you out of the room.
Yeah.
And the way it played out was very funny.
Okay.
Because basically he Issa was kind of the lawyer for the DOJ was saying something like, well, I would expect them to get a warrant and there would be an extradition process. He goes, no. What you're asking for is for them to actually bust down the door and yank you out of here without any warning.
Interesting.
He's like, you don't see that as a problem of sovereignty? And
that's a good argument.
To me, that's the same thing, because the line between virtual and physical is a lot blurrier than it used to be.
Well, and that's driving a lot of stuff. And I get it that the laws haven't quite caught up with that. And I know they're trying. I assume best intentions, and they're
right.
trying to apply due process to the digital age. And there was a little bit of a dust up in the news. And you know me in the news, Frank. I really don't watch it because of my blood pressure. But I did see the story recently where in the Mueller investigation of potential collusion with the Russian government, there were some emails that the transition team had in place while they were transitioning into their office about a year ago. They had these emails flying back and forth. And there was, again, a process where most people normally respect that, and they go through a subpoena process, and they could certainly get it. But because I believe it was the GSA already had these emails archived, they just basically kind of did an end run and picked them up.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, it wasn't illegal because it was the government asking for something the government already had, but it also wasn't the usual way people go about it. And this is all internal, on the U.S. sovereign soil. Everything is there, but you've still got this difference, I guess, between back in the day when they were. So let me put it in this context. This is why I found it fascinating, and this kind of goes back. Maybe this is a good example of what I mean about the difference between physical and digital. What if these had been letters that were written out on paper, handwritten on paper, or typed and mailed between the people in the transition team? Could they have just walked over and picked up the mail? And I believe the answer to that is no, although I'm not a lawyer. And maybe it is. Maybe it's true. Maybe if they were sitting in some government archive, it would be okay for another government agency to walk in and pick up the box. I don't know the answer to that question. But when you start thinking about the difference between the physical and the digital, I think that's where it's just what you said. The lines are kind of murky. And part of the reason is it's just so darn easy to just go have somebody, zip those up and send them over.
Right. And that's kind of the approach. I don't want to put words in Microsoft's mouth, but I think Microsoft's approach is, we have this laws that are based on paper,
right.
For centuries. And are they perfect? No, but they've pretty much been sorted out.
Yeah.
So let's just treat virtual things like paper.
I think
that's kind of the gist.
Yeah.
And I think that's perfectly reasonable.
I think so too. I think it's not the medium. It's the content, if you will, that's protected.
Right. Or the context.
I suppose. And so I understand, like I said, I understand the government's case. I get it. And let's just assume, best intentions, that they were just trying to, stop some bad guy from doing some bad things. Because that's probably accurate. But
right. And I would add to that, we all know what the road to hell is paved with.
I was going there.
And I would say in a case of bad people doing bad things, one of the things I think has happened, and again, I'm not a lawyer, is that for intelligence gathering purposes, the rules are a little different.
True.
And I would imagine if there were some serious shenanigans going on with this, this copy of this file is probably in a data center somewhere in Utah.
Whatever do you mean,
but it wouldn't be
Frank?
admissible in court. Can't imagine. But I think that's really the key here is it wouldn't be admissible in court.
Right.
And there's all sorts of landmines you're stepping in there when you talk about that. Is that right too? Well, no, but here's the real, I would say funny in an ironic sense, not funny, haha. Mm-hmm. because of all this wrangling legally, a lot of Amazon is basically on Microsoft's side on this, right? Because here's the problem. If I'm a German company or an Irish company, I'm going to think twice before I put my data on a data center, a server in a data center that's owned and operated by a U.S. company.
Yeah.
Because suddenly I am now beholden to U.S. law enforcement.
Well, and there's the whole thing that goes into effect. We're recording this on the 28th of December, 2017. In 3 days, GDPR kicks in.
Oh, yeah. I want to talk about that, too.
And that plays into this, right? Because now, now you have to play. If you sell products or services in Europe, you have to abide by those rules. And those rules are amazingly strict. And the fines are high for small businesses. And it just takes one person raising a flag to cost you 20 million euros or 4% of your gross, whichever is greater.
That's going to hurt.
Well, I'll tell you, some friends are doing, some friends who sell services and products. And me, I sell services and products, and some of my clients are in the European Union. And I've done what a lot of my friends have done. I don't have an extra 20 million euros laying around to pay the fine. So I've just invested in a couple of, I use WordPress to run my websites that sell these services and products. I've invested in a plugin that allows me to check a box and say, if you're buying this and you're in the European Union, you can't buy this right now.
I wonder how many companies are going to opt for that, because I think, again, the intentions behind GDPR, is that what it is?
Yeah.
GDPR?
Yeah.
I keep wanting to say GDR, German Democratic Republic, which was the...
Well, you lived there for a while.
Yeah, and unified Germany, yes, but yeah.
Yes.
Not in East Germany.
Yes.
But the intentions are great.
I agree.
That they're taking data privacy to that degree of seriousness is an awesome idea. But again, the speaking of heavy-handed, so see, we're not just bashing on the Department of Justice. This is just heavy-handed. If you're a small company and the minimum is 20 million euros, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, I just can't risk that. And I first learned about this reading Brent Ozar's blog, BrentOzar.com. He's got a post on it, why we stopped selling in the European Union. And he laid out a really good argument for it. And I know Brent, I work with him, and I talked with him about this. And we, probably should get him on the show at some time. He's a smart data guy. And his thinking is, you know what, it's going to be a really bumpy year, 2018 is, while they work out the details of this, but they'll figure it out. There'll be tools that'll be invented that will support making a request to basically delete all of your personal data, exposing that to the individual user. You think about what a My Account page looks like now, typically. There's a lot of that. A customer has a lot more control these days over their individual data than before. And that's really what they're after. They want to be able to go in, check a box, push the button, confirm that they want to delete all of their personal data and have it all removed from the database. Now, the kicker to this, and Brent points this out as one example, is there are systems out there that do not truly delete the data. They do what's called a soft delete. So they'll mark the data that's stored in the database still as deleted. They'll just set a bid on that row, and part of the metadata says this data is no longer available. However, that doesn't meet the requirements of GDPR. And there are database engines out there that work that way.
Well, and what if you have a tape backup somewhere? Technically, that is in violation.
Exactly. So there's a lot to be worked out here. And Brent's theory is that it's probably going to take him about a year to get the kinks out of it. And I think that's a fair estimate. they'll figure that out. But you're absolutely right. How do you deal with that with the backups? That's a good case, I guess, for employing more DBAs.
Right.
Restore all the backups.
Or just ClearDB, or just using ClearDB. Because they'll delete everything, including the backups. I think I have the new business model. So if you're curious as to what the heck I'm talking about, we have a whole episode devoted to this. But basically, the ClearDB is a database as a service provider that, due to I can laugh at it now.
Thankfully,
bureaucratic snafu, they deleted all my data and all my backups, and a few other people too.
Yep, that was well, we've hashed through that. It was a bad decision, bad business decision. Not so much a technical one, but a bad business decision. But it's true when you start thinking about what does that look like? Because good database backups should be restorable, and they will contain all of that data that the user just pushed the button on. Maybe 24 hours ago. You may have a month's worth of backups somewhere that have all of that user's data. So these are good, legitimate questions. I think they'll get worked out over time. I don't know if the law as it stands specifically addresses backups. I don't know that much about it, but I do. I'm smart enough to realize I don't have 20 million euros. And I don't have a good mechanism for removing this data. Some of this data, Frank, think about it. You're talking about not just backups, but just think about data living in the cloud. I don't even have access to the backups that exist for some of that data because it's all done for me.
Right. I mean, how would you, if you put something in OneDrive or Google Drive and you delete it, I don't know, was it deleted at the Google side or the Microsoft side?
Fair question. Yeah.
Don't know. Yeah. And my question is, who are the EU regulators going to, come with the lead pipe?
Exactly. Who writes the 20 million euro check?
Right. And it's just like, I think there's going to be, I think you're right. I mean, this is going to take some time. This is a case where this is probably a case where legislation that gets too aggressive and it's too reactionary is a bad case. But I think this is going to, work itself out in 1 year, possibly two.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think Brent's pretty wise on it. He's like, he did an analysis of his business and found that, a single-digit percentage of his business was coming from the European Union. He did the math. The risk outweighed the reward or the potential reward, and he's just flipping that same bet. We're just not going to sell to you if you're from there. We're really sorry, but and it's not. Nobody's upset. I'm not upset. I don't think Brent's upset. We wish it was different, but mainly for there's people there that will miss out on opportunities to learn and sign up for classes and
right.
products and services for a year. But I think that at the end of the day, it's probably going to, they're probably either going to change the law some or there's going to be clarifications. But in the meantime,
I would hold that thought though. If you're listening to this and you're in the European Union, get angry.
Well,
no, seriously, write your I don't know what they're called, but representatives. But I mean, get mad because choices are being made for you. I mean, those are the people that the European Parliament's going to listen to.
You would hope, and at the same time, there's a reason that this law came into being, and I understand the reasons. I'm sure you do, Frank. And yeah. We said this. We think there are very noble ambitions underlying this. Nobody sought to punish people or anything like that. And maybe this should have been done all along. I could make that argument for data privacy, but it is what it is today. We're not quite ready for it. And if you're thinking about, okay, how do we get from where we are today to a system like that, where the data privacy is placed back in the hands of the individual? A 20 million euro fine is a pretty powerful motivator for that.
Yeah, or 4% of your business, whichever is greater.
Yeah.
I think that gets people's attention. I agree. I mean, I think the intent, their heart is in the right place. Mm-hmm. But they position their heart in such a way that their head's in the oven. Or the guillotine, to go to a French example. And before anyone in France gets mad, if the last name Levine comes from France ultimately, though by way of Quebec. But no, I mean, I think it's one of those things where one of the things I learned on my time on K Street was writing public policy and legislation is hard because you have to take into account a lot of factors, right?
Yep.
And one of them is unintended consequences. I'm sure Brent didn't wake up one day. I don't want to speak for Brent, but he probably didn't wake up one day and was like, you know what? No more European Union. No soup for you. I don't think he did that. But I mean, if you just look at that money, it's like, I get it.
Yeah.
And if you're in the European Union, the only, if they're going to listen to anyone, they're going to listen to people with, who ultimately put them in office. And folks in the European Union have to get angry and write their representatives and say, hey, fix this.
Right. I agree. That's good advice.
I mean, because hoping it'll change in a year it means it's going to take 2 years.
Yeah.
Hoping it changes in 2 years means it's going to take 3, and so on and so on.
Yeah, it's going to be, it's going to be an interesting. I think 2018 is going to be a really interesting year for that. And once people start trying to buy stuff and realize that they can't, or access services and realize, well, it's not available anymore because of this law, I think that'll foster some change. But it's going to take that, and it's probably going to take some test cases. And, I worry about the mom and pop shops, the equivalent of the mom and pop shops on the internet. And, and it's going to be a very disappointing thing for those people to try and log into their accounts in 3 days and they not be active.
Right. And it's gonna be interesting how that plays out.
Yep. We'll keep our eyes and ears tuned to it, and we will be sure to let you know, because it is a data related thing, and we are data people.
That's right. We're data driven.
We are.
So getting back to the sovereign cloud business. Mm-hmm. One of the things that these companies are doing, because building a data center is a pretty big investment. Sure. If I want to build a data center, I've heard billions of dollars. I don't know if that's true, but it's in that neighborhood.
That makes sense.
So what they've done is they started off with China, but they've done it now in Germany. So this is what they call a sovereign cloud in Germany. So remember, what they're doing is they're hedging their bets in case they lose the court case.
That makes sense.
So what they're saying now is that, well, okay, if the Department of Justice argument is that it's because the data center is owned and operated by a U.S. company. So again, law of unintended consequences. What they've basically done is a German company, I think it's T-Mobile or Deutsche Telekom, owns the data center.
Oh.
And they operate the data center. Microsoft leases it from them.
I see. I saw that coming. Yeah, the leasing.
And I think they did it in Germany first. And then you can easily imagine that they're going to, if the court cases don't go that way. So, the funny thing is, and this is funny in a sad, ironic way, is that after all this time spent in court, they're actually going to make it harder for themselves to get the data. I don't know. It's just ridiculous. Yeah.
It seems like there's got to be a better way. And the example you gave of France,
right.
That's a good example. And again, I agree with you. I think it's an overreaction. I think it's a heavy-handed approach, and that usually doesn't work.
No. And it's this, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to kind of reverse engineer a way around that, the way that the law is written.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's all going to be a whole bunch of time wasted, and it's not going to apply anyway because the ownership has changed.
Wow.
But
so on the bright side, well, I don't know.
On the bright side, I had my aha moment about Hadoop.
You were telling me about this earlier. We had a call earlier. Frank and I talk as much as we can, by the way. And you were you called me on Facebook Messenger, and I love that because we can video. If you're in the car, I can watch. You can show me where you're driving, and
right.
And we can talk. But you mentioned this. You went through. Of course, you went through the data science certification. You went through some other certifications at edX.
Right.
You watched videos on Lynda, and you found this course, and you watched that, and everything just kind of clicked.
Yeah, because like one of the things about Hadoop is that, and I love the edX courses. So first off, if you're doing the data science certification through edX, the data scientist certification, there's really not any Hadoop content. It was only the courses I took to become the certified data engineer that had the Hadoop stuff.
Right. So the analyst, big data analyst stuff.
Big data analyst. Yeah, that's it.
Yep.
Which I found kind of interesting because Hadoop is kind of central to a lot of big data projects, which is then essential to feeding some machine learning algorithms.
Right. Which is data science.
Which is data science.
Yeah.
So for me, that was always kind of like a big blind spot in the program. And I get it. I don't know where you would fit it in the way they have the syllabus now, but they should at least mention it. But I never felt like I grokked Hadoop.
Right.
Like I knew what it did. I knew how it worked. And in the process of coming up with my course for Wintellect Now, I was like, yeah, I know how it works, but I don't know why the heck you would use it.
Yeah.
And then, I've been reading a lot, and then I finally clicked this morning, actually. I was like, of course, maybe, some sleep deprivation played into it too. But I had that moment of, I understand the universe now.
Well, that's awesome. We talked about this earlier. And,
right.
And you said to me what others have said to me about, like SSIS. I've written bunches of books and parts of books on SSIS, and people will come up to me every now and then and they'll say, I read these other books on SSIS and those losers didn't know what they were talking about. I read your book and bam, you're awesome. You're just great. You're the best writer ever. Now, I know for a fact that there's an equal or maybe greater number of people out there going to those people formerly classified as losers and saying, I read books by that loser, Andy Leonard, and I couldn't understand it. And then I read your book and bam, it made sense. And I wrote a blog post about this, and I think it's called something like The Last Book on SSIS You Read or something like that, the last SSIS book you read. And what I said to you in the call, I'll repeat. I think what happens is everybody's looking for a place to start, and you're at zero or near zero. You can spell Hadoop or SSIS, and you go and you start reading and listening to stuff, listen to videos, taking courses, and you glean stuff. You don't get it all. You don't have any context, but that's where you're building the context, right?
Right.
And finally, maybe 2 or 3 books or 2 or 3 YouTube videos or classes or online courses. You get into it a little bit and all of a sudden, bam, you know it. And it's just human nature to think, well, that last course was the one. That's when lightning struck. But the truth is, you build the basis of a foundation. Let's compare it to building a house, right? You poured the footer first, and then you build a foundation, and then you could build a house. And I contend that you can do that in any order with any collection of authors about SSIS or any courses about Hadoop. Now, granted, I think there's a lot more to it than that, and I'm oversimplifying it, but I think that's what it takes to build context. If you just throw words at people and ideas at people who have no context to then surround it with, I don't think you're going to learn.
No, absolutely. And I think even you mentioned lightning, you used the example of lightning striking.
Yeah.
Lightning striking is the last step in a process that takes about, 20, 30 minutes with the electrons building up.
That's true.
I mean, it takes a lot for you hit that threshold where the lightning the electricity will jump from point A to point B.
Yeah.
And I think that's really key there. Plus, too, the other thing is that my wife once made the observation, and I think she said it tongue in cheek, where You know, why is it when you're looking for something, if it's always in the last place you look? You always find it in that last place.
I like that.
Well, yeah, because too bad you didn't go there first, right? And I also think people's learning styles are different.
True.
You know, the course that I cut my teeth on Hadoop was the edX one, which is pretty good. But it just showed you how to do stuff. Didn't really say why or what was going on the covers.
Right.
The other good one that I did, but it still was the Linda Fundamentals one by Lynn Langett, who was, she guessed number 2 or 3.
Yeah. 3, I think.
3. Very good course, but like, I don't know, there was just like one part where it was like missing for me. And it was not so much Hadoop in general or HDFS. It was really what MapReduce is, why you would use it, what purpose does it serve, and why would because I think a lot of existing Hadoop courses out there, they don't want to talk about MapReduce. They want to talk about frameworks built on top of it, like Hive or Pig.
Right.
Because realistically, if you're doing most real world projects that have been done last couple of years and on, have probably used some framework on top of that, rather than writing MapReduce kind of hands down in that.
Oh yeah.
That's but I think it's once you understand the fundamentals of that and like how that works, it's like, whoa.
I totally agree. I'm taking the course now at edX. There's like 3 courses in the data analyst certification. I've got 2 of them. I knocked out 2 of them at the end of I think in November, and I waited until December to sign up for the 3rd. And as you know, they block you from signing up the last month of the quarter. And I understand it, but you know what? I could have done that. So wish they did.
That's a relatively new change that they've made. And I understand it, but you know, certainly there's got to be a better way.
Well, you're knocking 4 months of sales out of your sales cycle there, I would think.
Right.
But anyway, I it's fresher in my mind, I think, than yours. I think you took it around a year ago, and or 6 months ago, if I remember right.
6 months ago.
Yeah. I remember, because it was just last month for me, I remember Graham talking about why you would do some of this. He gave, I thought, some pretty fair examples of it. Now, but also I came into these courses, Frank, with 2 decades of data integration experience. Okay. So I was in a different place than you, and I'm not picking on you. I'm just saying, you know, if I was listening.
No, exactly. I mean, this is your wheelhouse. I mean, this is, you know, there's 2 observations I want to add. I took those courses because I didn't realize that the final data scientist certification was only offered 4 times a year.
Right.
So they knock out 8 months of their sales cycle on that one. So, but that was where the phrase "there's no brakes on the F train" came from.
Right.
Because I wanted to keep my mind like active and not like, you know, turn it off for 2 months and then get to it.
I'm curious, Frank. How many of those certifications do you have now? It's like 20, isn't it? If you count
something, I think it's 19.
If you
19,
you count up the individual courses, yeah. So there were 10, 11 in the data science.
There are. So what's interesting is there's 10 in data science to get the data science cert. Then I did the 4 to get that data analyst. Yeah. But they've added another professional certification program that's also 10 classes long.
Ooh.
Certified big data engineer.
Interesting.
The cool thing is that 4 of those classes apply to that's part of that analyst certification, apply to the big data engineer.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So so you're once you finish that, you'll be well on your way to the next that you could be a certified data engineer.
Well, I want to I definitely want to do that. I mean, that's you've inspired me to do that. I've taken some of the data science certifications, but not as many. I haven't finished it, and I'm not even halfway finished. but I did change gears and start taking the data analyst stuff because I wanted to get my hands on really on Spark. That's what I was after.
Right.
I kept hearing such.
Well, as I was doing, I know you've done a lot of the SSIS stuff, and as I was doing the class on Spark, I'm like, Andy would eat this up.
You told me that, and that's one of the reasons why I did eventually. It took me 6 months. But I eventually got around to doing it, and you were absolutely right. I had all of this, again, I had all of this context. I mean, I was doing data integration, Frank, before I knew what it was called. I was building applications in Visual Basic 3, I'm telling on myself, back in the 90s, that would essentially pump data and normalize it and conform it. I was doing all of those things. I just didn't know what any of those words meant. I didn't know the terms for it, but I knew you had to do this in order to collect data from disparate sources. I built this thing, a manufacturing execution system. It was over 20 years ago. I called it Plant-Wide Webs. And yeah, I know, cute. But we would collect data from all of these buses. So with Alan Bradley, I can't remember the name of the communication bus we were using, but there was all of these protocols, and I remember them running at 19.2 kilobaud. And, we were polling, and every 10 seconds, this was before the days of dynamic HTML even, I would write every 10 seconds, I would write out a new .htm file on the server. I would overwrite it. And if you were sitting anywhere on the network, you'd hit, your refresh button, and it would refresh with the latest values in your browser. Was it super high tech? No, but every 10 seconds was about the best I could do to collect data from all over this plant. And literally thousands of what we call tags in human machine interface software like RSView and Wonderware. There's a lot of really cool software out there. But the idea was exactly what we're talking about nowadays with IoT, right? Except it was just inside of this, 4, 5, 6 acre plant. That was manufacturing stuff. And we would pull data in from all of these devices on this little bus. And that's essentially, it was a little mini IoT. And we were able to see stuff like that. So when we start talking about these things in the sense of big data and pushing a network to its limit and being able to test it, and going through the data integration process and munging and data wrangling and stuff like that, I get it. I did it back in the old days when it was 1,000 times slower.
Right. No, exactly. And it's the cool kids call that, I think, what you did now, not just IoT, but IIoT.
Oh, really?
Industrial IoT.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But no, I mean, and the idea of machines communicating with machines is not was not invented, in 2013. I mean, it was the moon lander relied on a lot of components talking to one another.
Sure.
So, I mean, it's interesting how some of the stuff we do that we think is new is not all that new.
Agreed. But it's very interesting.
It's just more widely distributed.
And what you said, though, was absolutely right. And you and I have had this. We've gone back and forth. I talked to you years ago about business intelligence because I knew it was obvious to me your artistic abilities, your talent, and the presentation, I think, is the deliverable in any business intelligence project. And so you already had that eye and that gift. And it would be very easy, I think, for you to pick up the rest of it. Now you agree with me, and it's okay. We're cool. I mean, that you didn't before. I'm not bitter. I promise.
It's funny, and I'm okay with this show running long because this is a special moment here. But the most developers, and keep in mind, software engineer from day one almost, and their experience with reporting, just that word, you know what comes into their mind? This horrible thing called crystal reports.
Oh, gosh. Yes, I did some crystal reports work, yes.
Which is kind of like, there's plenty of animated GIFs on here that would be nope, 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 nope. So as soon as you hear the word, well, what's BI? Well, it's writing reports. Nah, that's okay.
Right. No, I get it.
Which is probably, to my detriment. I mean, if I had been in data science, like 10 years ago, as opposed to getting into, Windows tablet PC and Windows phone,
Yeah, Frank, I don't see that though. I disagree with you, because I think what you're going to see is as data science goes mobile, and it's doing it now.
True.
That you're going to be uniquely positioned for that. I think it's one of those cases of all things working together for the good. And at the same time, we've had the inverse experience where while you were going through the Spark courses, were thinking the same thing about me. Andy would eat this up, and you're right. I dove into it, and I'm looking forward to knocking out that last course or two, so that I too can get that data analyst certificate. And I'm looking forward to taking some more. The data engineer thing just sounds awesome. And also, I saw an ad for Databricks. So Azure has Databricks in private preview right now. I actually signed up for it. I hadn't had a chance to tinker with it yet, but it's out there and I've got access. It's going to go public probably around the time the show comes out.
Very cool.
There will be an Azure Databricks preview. And if you think about what's going on, and this was another part of our conversation earlier, we were talking about how when you get right down to the bottom of Hadoop, we're talking key value, right? Which is a tuple.
Right.
And that's almost equivalent to the machine language of data. And in any database. And when you think about what does a relational database do? Well, it's an abstraction on that model. So it's very much like a second order language, or maybe even a third order language on top of that. And that's like the machine code of data. And now when you start putting this in the context of things like Hadoop, that talks in tuples, if you will. And then on top of that, we've got things like Hive and Pig. And then on top of that, we've got things like Spark that's automating things and creating pipelines and doing all of this stuff. And then on top of that, now you've got, Databricks, and it's in my imagination, Frank, it's very tectonic, and I don't want to overplay that, but it's like layers on top of layers on top of layers. And we're in a time where new stuff is being invented. They're creating even new layers. It's not just new tech. It's a whole new type of tech,
No, absolutely. I think we live in a very interesting time, and you just spat off a bunch of terms that some folks listening may not know what they are. So one thing that I think Andy and I talked about it, is we're going to have, very much in the style of .NET Rocks, they have geek outs where they pick one topic and they kind of go deep on it.
Yep.
Now they go deep on things like moon bases and jet fuel, but that's a whole other thing. I think what we're going to do in 2018 is have shows that, today we're going to talk about Hadoop.
Yeah.
And, we'll kind of have like a back and forth on Hadoop. And then we'll do a back and forth on Spark. Yep. And then we'll kind of talk about, well, how is that different than Hadoop?
I think that would be fantastic, where we can go from, the shallow to up to people's necks.
Right. And a lot of this stuff, I mean, if you're already a data engineer or DBA or in that data world, or you're a software engineer, you already have a lot of the mental processes to do this.
Yeah.
It's just a question of, when you hear data scientists talk, it automatically sounds like Charlie Brown's parents sometimes. Wah. And I mean, it's true. And it's just like, I have to be conscious of that too when I'm explaining stuff when I'm doing training or videos, where I realize that if I'm talking to developers, they have no idea what I'm talking about.
Right.
Which one, I mean, that's awesome, because I can now listen to those data science videos and understand what they're saying.
Right.
Which wasn't that long ago. That wasn't the case. Because a lot of this goes deep into this. In fact, I actually got a message from a guy I used to work with many, many moons ago. And he said, he basically had that problem where he would watch stuff and it would make no sense.
Yeah.
Because he'd be talking about, stochastic gradient descent or, stuff like that. And it's not necessarily extremely difficult to grasp the concept, but if you hear the official names, it sounds very scary.
Well, it's its own language, right? So there's semantics.
Yeah, it is.
And this is why I find technical conferences very much like I don't know, the technical equivalent of a vacation. I don't know what the right word would be, but if I'm talking to normal people, and I don't mean that we're abnormal, but we do have our own vocabulary. And when I go to a conference, I can use acronyms, and I don't have to stop and explain what that means. And I promise, I'm not throwing off on my family or people at church or, folks I run into in the store. But when they ask me what I do, I either say computer stuff or I just kind of leave it at that. But, if I'm at the PASS Summit or a SQL Saturday or something like that, I can talk about the niche. I can go deep. Right. And there's a lot of analogies we can use. And I love this idea. When you first posed this idea of drilling down deep on a topic, which was a month or so ago, I was like, yes, because we can do things like we can talk about analogies. Like I just talked about, how data is like almost machine code. Tuples are like the machine code of data, right? Well,
it's a brilliant observation. I had never really thought about
it. You can
that.
compare that to maybe to like the .NET framework, which is, if I'm not mistaken, is written mostly in C++, and it interacts with things like the printer drivers and stuff like that, and just all the hardware in the machine. So you now can abstract that. You can just say this class.print, right? And it'll send it to the printer. And you don't have to write
or Java for those folks on the other side of the fence. No, because one of the challenges of C or C++ is that you have to manage memory.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, when you were doing relatively simple tasks, and I don't mean that sounds really arrogant, but things like flying to the moon. No, I mean, if you only had 16K of memory,
right,
it wasn't unreasonable to to require that level of control.
Absolutely.
But when you're dealing with larger, more complex systems, no human being would be able to be productive and manage memory of gigabytes worth.
Right.
It's just not practical.
Well, so they abstracted that away, and that's what I'm talking about when I talk about as we move up from the tuple level, as we go up, as we see these new tectonic layers, as we see things being built on top of the older things. So we have Hadoop sitting here, and then we have Pig and Hive sitting on top of that, which abstract away some of the Hadoop. There's still Hadoop happening under the hood, but it's being managed differently. And there's, maybe it's staying in RAM instead of writing to a file that you have to then pick up again in the next step. And it builds on top of that. Then there's these pipelines that, you can build 4 or 5 steps and string them together. And now you can call them with a single command. And then there's this, another thing built on top of that where you can call several pipelines and string those together. That's what we're talking about here. And it's just a neat time to be in it because we understand from so many other parts of technology the next steps. We kind of know where this is going. It's just a matter of figuring out, okay, how are we going to do it? What's it going to be called? What's the syntax going to be? What are the commands going to look like? How's it going to work? And we kind of know the answers to these questions, but you still have to build it. You have to hang it on the wall and throw the switch. And that's happening. And it's just so cool to see it happening.
Yeah, and it's now more accessible than ever to more people, which I think is very exciting as well.
I completely agree with that, Frank.
So if you're curious about this, just stay tuned. These shows will be out in January.
I'm so looking forward to it, Frank.
Yeah, me too.
Coolness.
So I'd like to also thank everyone who has helped make the show a success. We're well over 30,000 downloads now.
Yeah, thank you.
In just over 6 months.
Wow.
I know. It's cool. I've had a blast. I don't want to speak for you, but I assume you did too.
Same here. Yes. No, this has been fantastic. And we started talking about this a little over a year ago and and playing around with different ideas and kind of, I don't know, munging.
Yes.
Munging ideas and bouncing stuff off the wall. And we recorded our first show back in February. And I think it went live in May because we wanted to get a few shows in the pipe recorded. We have fantastic list of guests so far. Just a great group. Check us out at datadriven.tv and sign up to be a data driver. We'll get some emails out to you. I've been slacking on the emails lately. I apologize if you're a data driver, but if more of you would sign up, I'd take it more seriously. I'm kidding.
Well, plus the annoying thing of billable work getting in the way, right?
Well, there's that. Yes, keeping the lights on and the roof over the head and food in the fridge. Yes.
Yeah. Pesky life.
Hopefully we'll become independently wealthy, Frank, and then we can just do shows all day long every day. That'd be awesome.
That would be awesome. I'll sign me up for that.
Well, this has been a fantastic ride this year. You did an awful lot of the work. When we were going from concept to recording, Frank invested a lot of time in training. Actually, you took some classes on how to do a successful podcast. You learned all about the business. You learned what works, what doesn't work. You did that work. And I think that's the number one reason why we're at about 31.5K downloads this morning. And
nice.
Thank you for all of that hard work, for the investment of the time. And there was some money as well invested. Thank you so much for that, Frank.
Hey, no problem. I think one of the things that coming out of 2016 and kind of the disaster that it had been for me personally and professionally, I knew the best thing to do going forward would be investing in myself.
Yep.
And the best way to do that is with training, certifications, obviously. I mean, I think 17 of those, all but 2 of those 19 or 20, I got in 2017.
Wow. So in 2018, if you're looking for a resolution, if you do resolutions, I do goals.
Yep.
And if you're looking for good goals, there's a goal. Pick up a couple of certs. Go to edX. There's courses there that you have to pay edX to get the official certificate, but you can get the knowledge for free. And, you complete the course. You can do that. Even the courses that cost, in my opinion, they're not overly expensive. But they may be. They're not free. So check out those courses. There's what's the one, Linda, that Lynn does, that's now part of LinkedIn. Which
is now part of Microsoft.
And there's Udemy, which has actually really economical courses. Pluralsight, has courses out there. There's a lot of places you can go and learn for a fixed monthly fee. Or
at Wintellect Now, of course.
Wintellect Now. I forgot to mention that. Well, how could I forget Wintellect Now?
And I'm going to get heat for that. Like you mentioned, your guy mentioned Pluralsight before.
I'm sorry. I've seen a bunch of them. So I go to a lot of them. You sent me a link earlier on Messenger to the one you did on Udemy, which, those individual courses, they're kind of like a la carte courses. And some of them are $5 or $10 or $15. I mean,
well, that's the thing with Udemy is that their pricing strategy is a little bit wonky. Mm-hmm. They'll say it's 95% off because normally it's like a $3,000 course, but today it's $15 or something like that. I bought a lot of stuff on Udemy. Are the courses worth $300? Some of them are. Are some of them worth $15? Yeah, I've never regretted $1 I spent on Udemy.
Interesting. Okay.
My only regret is that there's only so many hours in a day.
I hear that.
But Udemy is great because everybody's got $10, $15.
Yeah.
I mean, and if you don't, then there's always Khan Academy. You have to start somewhere.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I have a cool sign hanging out in my office. It's let me go back so I get the quote right. I'll edit this part out. And I hung it up in my office for a very important reason. And basically it says, your future is created by what you do today and not by what you do tomorrow.
Interesting.
It's that way that I see it the first thing when I walk in my office, and it's the last thing I see when I leave my office.
Nice.
Because maybe another thing I'll do in 2018 is, kind of explain how I was able to do those, 20 certifications in a year.
Yeah.
Is, I've done a lot of data science around learning, basically.
Sure.
And that would be an interesting experiment to kind of try it out on some folks. I don't know.
I think that would be, if not a topic for a show, a good topic for another show like we do like this, where we maybe spend 20 minutes diving into that, learning how to learn.
No, that's a good idea.
I think we both have some good stories to tell on how to do that. I'm still learning. I'm turning 55 in 2018, and I don't plan to slow down. I'm going to keep learning and keep growing. You mentioned Wintelect now, so I'm not going to feel bad about mentioning Bemel.academy. If you want to learn Bemel, business intelligence markup language, and Frank, I realized this yesterday. My last books, the physical books, arrived. I wrote I published 3 books in 2017, and that was a big year for me. I've never done that before. I've done 2 in a year, but never 3. And so that last book came in, and it's still a thrill. It was book number 12. Opened the box,
nice.
And there they were. And it's very exciting. This one's on data integration, lifecycle management. And, now that I've got my toe in the water on training, I kind of know how to set up an educational site with Bemel Academy. Look for more of that. I've got 2 more ideas, and I'll just leave that at that.
Cool. And a few domain names registered too.
No, really? Are you? Yeah, I do.
But stay tuned, kids, because 2018 is going to be interesting. I mean, for me personally, 2017 was about, I'll use a boxing analogy because my dad, as we're recording this, my dad passed away 11 years ago today. And my dad was an awesome person, but one of his favorite sports was boxing. I mean, I got a pretty good KO in 2016 with getting laid off.
Yeah.
My mom getting sick and all this sorts of drama associated with that. 2017, I said, you know what, this is my workout year. I'm going to, come back stronger than ever. And it was a rebuilding year. 2018 is going to be the butt kicking year.
There you go. I am in awe. There are no brakes on the F train. And I'm super inspired. I saw you take off in, I guess it was May of 2016 is where you really started picking up and running with it. And interestingly enough, I believe it was around the time you got that very adverse news, and you just poured it on. And now, here we are over 30,000 downloads later talking about data science, Frank. Certified data scientist, 19, 20 certifications on the book, and now you're creating courses.
Presented at several conferences already on data science. I mean,
yeah. Now you're creating content that others are learning it from. Hats off to you, dude.
And I think I see that's part of my mission, so to speak, my mission from God, referring to my Blues Brothers movie, is that, I see a lot of people that are kind of afraid of this. They shouldn't be afraid of this. This is awesome. It's exciting. We live in one of those transformational times that, we've been fortunate. If you've been in the industry, since I've been in the industry, I mean, I saw the rise of the web. I saw the rise of mobile. And this is this is another transformational moment where 10 years from now, it'll be something else, but we'll wonder how we got by without AI and machine learning.
Right. Completely agree. And I predate you at least one generation. I saw the rise of PCs.
Oh, yeah.
So starting in 1975.
Right. Was that the year Microsoft was founded?
I think it was after that. I want to say it was 77, 78. Might have been. I don't know. Maybe it was
definitely 70s. The 70s if you see the founder picture.
Yeah. I dressed like that. I did. But no, it's been a great ride. 2017 has been fantastic for Data Driven. It's been fantastic for, I think, for you and me. We've been friends for 12 years now. And wanted to work together forever. I'm so glad we started talking about this like 13, 14 months ago. It was your idea. All the credit goes to you for that. You've done most of the work, the lion's share of the work in this. So hats off to you, Frank, for all of that. I appreciate you letting me ride along with you.
Nah, dude, I can't picture a better co-pilot.
Awesome stuff.
So with that, we'll let the nice British lady take us out.
Thanks for listening to Data Driven. Don't just listen. Become a data driver by going to datadriven.tv to sign up to join the community, access to special events, tips and tricks, and more. Sign up today at datadriven.tv.